In this lesson, we'll be learning about the most powerful drawing tool available in graphic software. It's called the Pen Tool. It's a vector drawing tool, and it's basically made up of creating what are known as anchor points and connected with lines. And the lines can either be straight or they can be curved. Now, the curvature of the line is controlled using the anchor points and handles. I'm going to demonstrate some of that right now. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here and just pick a spot on the screen and go over to my pen tool, which is about 3/4 of the way down your tool set here. And if I hold it down, you can see there are a number of variations on the pen tool. There's the pen tool itself, which is what I'm going to use. The Freeform Pen Tool, which is basically just clicking and dragging and creating a freeform line. Then you can add anchor points, delete anchor points, and convert anchor points. Now the Convert Anchor Point tool lets you go from straight lines to curved lines and vice versa. So let me just select Pen Tool here and just quickly demonstrate how we can do this. You just simply click to create an anchor point, and then you pick another point somewhere, click again, and it draws a straight line in between the points as I click. So if I can click random geometric shapes here, and by clicking, I'm simply creating straight lines. Now to close this, to make it a closed shape, I click on the first point, and you can see how that cursor changes to what looks like a little circle next to the pen tool. So if I click and close that, I've now got basically what's called a path. Now let me go to another tool in the tool set here. These are all vector tools here, and I have my selection tools. I have the Path Selection tool and the Direct Selection tool. Basically, the Path Selection tool lets me select the whole path in a single clip, where the Direct Selection tool lets me click on individual anchor points or even parts of the line and manipulate it or edit it as I wish. So I'm going to go with the Path Selection tool right now just to highlight this, and you can see all my anchor points and my straight lines in between. If I go all the way over here to my panels, you can see beside layers there's channels and then paths. I'm going to click on paths right now. And you can see here I've got one called work path. You can also see one that I previously created earlier, which I'll get to shortly. But right now I have work path. So I'd like to actually save this path. So I can simply double click it, and it asks me to give it a name. I'm just going to call it random geometry. And click OK, and now you can see that I have that saved there. Now if I want to highlight it, well, it's currently highlighted, but if I want to highlight it with my selection tool, I can just click on it here. If I want to deselect, I can just click on another path or click in the empty area directly below. And it looks like it's disappeared right now. It still exists, but I don't see it unless I highlight that particular path. Now let's talk about creating curved lines. I'm going to create a new path. So I'm going to go back to my pen tool, which by the way is shortcut P on the keyboard. And to create a curved line, I click and drag. And you can see here it generates what are known as handles. And my next line will be dictated by the direction and the distance of the handles from the anchor point. So I can create some amoeba shapes here, some random organic shapes. And again, I can close it off, and I can close and click and drag rather, or I can just click it. Either way, I can actually go back to these and edit them. So let me demonstrate that now. The best way to edit them is using the Direct Selection tool. It's the white arrow. Now if I want to highlight that line, I can click it and highlight it. I can do a few things. I can click an anchor point to highlight it. Then I can move it around. I can also grab those anchor points, and it's like a seesaw, if you will, and it dictates the direction and severity of the curve by the angle as well as the distance. You can see here that the shorter the distance, the less severe the curve. The greater the distance, the more severe the curve. And again, I can grab these and move them all around. Now if I want to actually just pull a line, I can grab the line and actually do it very organically as well. And I can isolate a single anchor point, or with my Shift key, I can isolate several. I can also do the isolation by clicking and dragging across the anchor points. And this holds true again for the straight lines as well. I can click and drag and then make some changes with position and the angle and the distance of the anchor point from the next anchor point. I'm going to go back into this curve shape and show you some more subtleties there are in manipulating that line. I'm going to start by highlighting it. And you see how these anchor points basically are a straight line that move around the anchor point. And I can again stretch that distance and so on. But let's say I only want to affect one half, one side of that anchor point. Well, I would go back to my Convert Point tool and simply grab that handle. And you can see how suddenly it's separated from the other side. It's no longer dependent on the handle on the other side. Now let's say I want to hold that angle fixed, but I still want to rotate it around the anchor point. I can go back to my Direct Selection tool. Now if I just grab this, it will still move to one side by itself. But if I want to basically lock it together, with my Option key down on my Mac, my Alt key down on my PC, you'll see the cursor changes there. It kind of locks that angle. Now if I want to just work on it separately, I just let go of my Option key on the Mac, Alt key on the PC. And that way I can control either side of that anchor point. Now that's all good, but what do we do with this path once it's created? Well, most of the time you would, number one, save it just to have a reference to the line, but two, you would turn it into a selection and then typically fill it with a color or an image or maybe make a mask out of it or something. So let me just go right now with this highlighted. I'm just going to go to my Path Selection tool and then go over to the Paths panel and pull down on the sub-menu and choose Make Selection. And here I can establish the softness of the line and whether it's anti-aliased or not. You can see here I can add to other selections if that option is available. But for now we're just going to say 0 pixels, anti-aliased, OK. And you can see the marching ants. And if I go over to my Layers panel, I'll create a new layer. And I'll fill that with a color. I'll just toggle this red to the foreground and go Edit Fill. Fill with normal blending, foreground color 100%, click OK. And I can go Command D on the Mac, Control D on the PC, and if I want to hide the view of my path, I can go back to my paths and just click in the empty area. And I've just created a solid fill based on that vector shaped line, which is the path. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to actually delete that. Just drag across it with my Marquee tool, hit my Delete key, click away to deselect. I'm going to delete that set of paths too. I'm just going to highlight it and hit Delete. I'll keep the bell one and I'll highlight it. It's one I previously drew. And again, if I go and highlight it with the Selection tool, it's a number of pieces, so I can hit my Shift key to select all the components. Or I could have dragged across it all. And if I wanted to manipulate it at all, I would just go to my Direct Select tool. I can click away and then click back on. And let's say I wanted to pull that line out. Well, I'm going to undo that, Command Z. But anyway, this gives me the opportunity to go back in and edit it. And if I wanted to do a good job, I would zoom in, spacebar to move, and just take a close look and make those fine-tuning adjustments. Okay, let me just zoom back out here. Command minus, Control minus. Now your assignment is to trace a path for each one of these elements here. So what I'll do is I'll demonstrate the CN logo. I'm going to hide this right now by clicking away. I'll go back to my pen tool. And I'll just zoom in on that CN logo, bring it into the center here, and show you how I would deal with this. Basically, I'm going to use some modifier keys. So as you saw, let me zoom out again here. By clicking down on my Alt key on the PC, I can change my pen tool to a convert point tool. And by holding down the Control key on the PC, I can change my pen tool to a direct selection tool. And you'll see how this comes into play here. Let me just move this up and zoom in. So I'm going to be doing combinations of clicking and dragging. So for example, I know there's a straight line across here. I'll start in this corner, click on it. Now another thing I can do is constrain the line by holding my Shift key down. So I'm going to go to this corner, Shift key down, click. Then I'll go down to the bottom where the straight line pretty well ends. Shift click again. Now I can actually pull a line out from this anchor point. And basically the rule of thumb is you can see the distance of this curve. This handle should be about the length of 1/3 of that distance. Just a rule of thumb, but that'll kind of get you on a good starting point. Now I'm going to click at the bottom here, and I'm going to drag. And you can see as I'm dragging, I can manipulate this line. I can push it back in or pull it out to make it more severe. So I'm just going to try to get as close as I can to that curved line, because I can always come back and correct this a little later. So that's not bad. I'm going to go up to where the line straightens out again and pull and drag. And now I want to move this point a bit. Let me zoom in here. I want to move this point. I can actually hold down my Command key on the Mac or Control key on the PC, and you see how it changes into that direct select tool. I can just grab that anchor point and move it around. I can also grab these anchor points with that key still down and fine tune those adjustments. Now here's a really big step to do. It's coming out as a curved line, but I really want it to be a straight line. So I'm going to hold down my Option key. I'm on a Mac. It'd be the Alt key on the PC. Click that point once. That kills the second half of the handle. Then I can proceed to click, which would create a straight line rather than a line that would have a little curve in it, and move from there. Now I'm going to click here and drag. Click and drag again to create those curves. And again, I'm coming into a straight line, so I'm going to hold my Alt key down. I could have manually gone over to the Convert Anchor tool, but I'm going to stay on the pen tool. Now you see here by going over there I deselected. I can just click on that last point to continue on. If I miss it, I'm actually starting a new line. So again, down to the bottom here where it's straight. I'm going to hold my Shift key down to get a perfectly vertical line. Then I'm going to pull the line out here a little bit. And I'm going to go to the other end of the curve and click and drag. And I can see here I'm going to go back to my Command key, Control key on the PC, and make some adjustments to this curve. And then Alt key, click, because I'm going from a curve to a straight line. Shift click to hold that perfectly horizontal. Click and drag, pull that out. Now it's conceivable that I could do a middle step here, but I can see that this line is too long. So if I wanted to do the middle step, let me just undo that. Actually, I'll click here again. I'll hold down my Command key and just lower the severity of that. I found that, I don't really need the extra point, and it actually makes it less accurate. So let me do some step backwards. Did an undo, another step backwards, another step backward, and just go right to the other side of this curve. And it actually does give me gives me a better curve. Okay, so again, I'm going to click with my Alt key down right here. Shift key down to create a perfectly vertical line. Click that anchor point, drag out my handle. Click at the other end of the curve, create my line. Alt click to break that half of the handle off. Shift click to hold my line perfectly horizontal. Shift click, again straight line vertical. Shift click straight line horizontal, then click and drag, pull that handle out. After a while you get quick on it. It does take a little while to get used to though. Alt click, your hands, it'll be like playing an instrument. Your hands will just know where to go after a while. Shift click, pull that out, come across here. Again, alt click here, shift click here, pull that out. Now if my line's perfectly straight, I don't have to alt click that to kill it, but it does guarantee a straight line coming out. Now here's a pretty long curve, so I'm going to go halfway around. I'm actually going to pull this line out a bit. Go halfway around, and then come around top here. And Control key click to move that point a little bit. And this handle seems a little long now. Okay, and I'm almost done here. Spacebar to move. Click the straight line. Oh, let me undo that. I can see that I should have alt clicked this last point. You notice that it gave me a little bit of a curve there. Alt click. Now I'll create a straight line. Then pull that handle out a little bit. Create my curve. Alt click. Straight line to the top. And we now have our path. I'm going to double click on that work path, and I'll call it CN and save that. Now if I want to convert that to a selection, again I would go to the pull down menu with it highlighted, make selection, click OK, go back to my layers. I would create a new unique layer for this. I can double click there and call it CN, and I'll zoom out and I'll just fill it with a light blue. So I've selected a light blue in my foreground color and just go fill. This will give me a good idea of how close I was because it's going to cover up that black. And I can just deselect, Control D, and there we go. If I want to go back to the path, I can go to Paths, highlight it, and you can see that it appears. And if I want to work on it, I can use a number of these tools. Let's say I wanted to pull that out. I'm going to undo that. But anyway, that's how you can finesse it, by coming back to it, mostly with the direct select tool. Okay, so your assignment is to trace each one of these elements, then create a separate layer, save each one of those paths, name them, then create a separate layer for each one, make a selection, fill it with a solid color. And that is your pen tool assignment for today.